At 9:14 a.m., I learned how quickly power makes people cruel. I'm standing barefoot on cold concrete, the lake fog still clinging to my ankles, when the engine growl starts. Not a truck. Not a delivery van. A bulldozer. Yellow. Loud. Purposeful. Rolling straight toward the boathouse my grandfather built by hand before color TV existed. That's when I see her. Vivica Drummond. HOA president. Sunglasses on. Phone up. Champagne flute in the other hand, like this is a celebration instead of an execution. And in that moment, I realize this isn't about a fine. It's about control. They tell you grief comes in waves. What they don't tell you is that sometimes it shows up wearing a blazer and holding a clipboard. 6 months earlier, I moved into the lake house thinking it would save me. After my wife Lillian died, silence became unbearable. The kids were grown. The condo felt like a waiting room for the rest of my life. The lake house was the only place that still felt like home. Mirror Lake, Michigan. Glassy water. Loons calling at dawn. The kind of quiet that forces you to feel things instead of numbing them. My grandfather Dutch bought that land in 1963. Built 4 houses himself. Ours was the first. The biggest. The one with the boathouse. That boathouse mattered. It's where Lillian and I carved our initials. Where my grandfather taught me how to reinforce beams so they'd outlive me. I spent $400,000 restoring it. Carefully. Respectfully. As if the past was watching. And then the HOA showed up. Mirror Lake Estates. New money. Identical beige mansions. Perfect lawns. Soulless symmetry. They formed the HOA years ago, after a developer swallowed the shoreline piece by piece. Our properties predated them, but Dutch, old, tired, sick, signed paperwork he barely read. I inherited the house. I also inherited their resentment. The first letter came quietly. Certified mail. $300 fine. Architectural violation. The boathouse color wasn't approved. Forest green. The same green it had been since Kennedy was president. I called. Left messages. Tried to be reasonable. I'm an engineer. I solve things. They ignored me. Then came the deadline notice. Then the final notice. Each letter colder. Each one more smug. Purple ink. Smiley face. Vivica's signature looping across the page like a dare. And now here we were. The bulldozer blade lowered. Wood cracked. Glass shattered. A sound like bones breaking underwater. I felt something snap in my chest, sharp and quiet. Vivica smiled. She wanted me to beg. To scream. To collapse. What she didn't know, what no one in that HOA knew, was that my grandfather didn't just build houses. He planned. He bought land no one else wanted. Kept deeds others forgot. Filed documents that never made it into digital databases. He believed ownership was power, and power should be silent until it mattered. As the boathouse fell apart plank by plank, Vivica raised her phone higher, narrating like she was filming a victory lap. She thought this was the end of my story. It wasn't. It was the moment I stopped mourning and started remembering who taught me how to win. Grief makes you quiet. Anger makes you precise. I didn't say a word as the last beam of the boathouse collapsed into the lake. No shouting. No threats. Just stillness. That seemed to confuse Vivica more than anything. She lowered her phone, tilted her head, like she'd expected tears and instead found silence. That silence wasn't weakness. It was calculation. After the bulldozer left, after Vivica's white SUV rolled away like she just finished brunch, I walked down to the water. The lake was calm again, pretending nothing had happened. Bits of green painted wood floated near the dock like debris from a shipwreck. I knelt and picked up a fragment. My grandfather's handwriting was still visible on the underside. Pencil marks. Measurements. That's when I remembered something Dutch used to say. People who rush power always forget paperwork. That afternoon, I drove into town. Not to a lawyer. Not yet. First, I went to the county records office. A brick building that smelled like dust and old carpet. The kind of place no one under 40 ever voluntarily enters. I asked for everything. Original plats. Deeds. Easements. Water rights. Subsurface agreements. Anything tied to Mirror Lake dating back to the 1960s. The clerk raised an eyebrow. Most folks just want a copy, she said. I want the story, I replied. 4 hours later, my hands were black with ink and time. And that's when it started to come together. See, when my grandfather bought the land in 1963, zoning laws were flexible. Developers weren't carving up lakes yet. HOAs weren't a disease. He bought not just shoreline parcels, but access routes, utility corridors, drainage paths, even mineral and soil rights beneath neighboring lots, bundled cheaply because no one thought they mattered. But they did. They mattered a lot. The developer who built Mirror Lake Estates decades later? He never fully untangled those rights. He just built over them. Sold homes fast. Passed headaches downstream. To the HOA. Which meant Vivica wasn't standing on solid ground, legally or literally. I requested copies. Paid fees. Smiled politely. The clerk slid a thick folder across the counter and said, "You're going to make someone very unhappy." I drove home slowly. Past identical mailboxes. Identical lawns. Identical houses with identical rules written by people who thought money erased history. That night, the HOA sent an email blast. Subject: Successful enforcement of community standards. They attached photos. My destroyed boathouse. My property. A warning disguised as a celebration. Comments rolled in. Thumbs up emojis. So glad the board is keeping property values high. Vivica replied to almost every one. I didn't comment. Instead, I started making calls. First, a land use attorney. Then an environmental engineer. Then a surveyor who owed my grandfather a favor from 30 years ago. By the end of the week, I had confirmation. Mirror Lake Estates used a private access road that crossed land still titled under my family trust. Their stormwater runoff drained through a culvert installed on an easement that expired in 1998. Their docks? Anchored in water where I held primary water rights. And the HOA clubhouse? Built on land technically classified as temporary use only. Temporary. As in removable. The next HOA letter arrived quickly. This one smug. They'd added demolition fees. Legal fees. Daily penalties. The total climbed past $11,000. Vivica personally dropped it off this time. She stood on my porch, heels clicking, sunglasses reflecting my face back at me like I was already defeated. "You should have complied," she said softly. "This didn't have to get ugly." I looked at her clipboard. Then I looked at the lake. "Oh," I said calmly. "It's not ugly yet." Her smile faltered. Just for a second. Because for the first time, she realized I wasn't reacting the way victims are supposed to. And she had no idea that every single thing her HOA depended on was sitting inside my filing cabinet. Power loves routine. And HOAs survive on the belief that no one will ever challenge them. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday night at the clubhouse. Mandatory attendance for ongoing compliance matters. Translation: public shaming. I showed up early. The room smelled like lemon cleaner and entitlement. Folding chairs arranged in neat rows. A long table at the front where Vivica and the board sat elevated like a jury that had already decided your guilt. People whispered when they saw me. Some stared. Others avoided eye contact, like misfortune was contagious. Vivica tapped her microphone. "Let's begin." She started with numbers. Fines collected. Violations corrected. Community success stories. My demolished boathouse appeared on the projector again. This time with applause. That's when she turned to me. "Mr. Cordell," she said, voice sweet as syrup, Would you like to explain why you've failed to comply and why further legal action is now unavoidable? Every eye landed on me. This was the moment she wanted. The humiliation. The public submission. I stood. I'd like to ask a question first, I said evenly. She sighed. Make it quick. I held up a copy of a deed. Yellowed. Stamped. Official. Does the HOA acknowledge this parcel as privately owned land? Vivica glanced at it, unimpressed. Our legal team has reviewed all property boundaries. Great, I replied. Then you'll recognize that the access road you all drove in on tonight crosses this parcel. Murmurs rippled through the room. Vivica stiffened. That road has existed for years. So have the rights attached to this deed, I said. Including the right to revoke access. One board member leaned forward. You can't just. I can, I interrupted calmly. And I have. I clicked a remote. The screen changed. Survey maps. Highlighted easements. Expiration dates. The room went quiet. I continued. The stormwater system under this building drains through my land without a valid easement. The docks are anchored in waters where I hold primary rights. And this clubhouse? I paused. It's built on land approved only for temporary use. Vivica laughed. A sharp, brittle sound. This is intimidation. No, I said. This is documentation. I handed copies to the nearest board member. Then another. Faces drained of color. A woman in the back raised her hand. Are you saying the HOA isn't legally allowed to exist? I'm saying, I answered, it exists because no one bothered to check. Vivica slammed her gavel. This meeting is adjourned. People stood. Voices overlapped. Panic crept in where confidence used to live. As I walked out, my phone buzzed. A text from my attorney. Filed injunction. Emergency hearing set. Outside, Vivica followed me into the parking lot. You're bluffing, she hissed. I met her stare. If I were bluffing, I'd be louder. She watched me drive away. The next morning, the HOA's bank accounts were frozen pending investigation. By afternoon, the city issued a notice. Access review required for Mirror Lake Estates. And by nightfall, the same neighbors who'd applauded my demolition were knocking on my door. Not to apologize. To ask if I could fix it. I looked past them, at their manicured lawns, their identical houses, their dependence on systems they never understood. And I realized something. They didn't need an HOA. They needed permission. By sunrise, Mirror Lake Estates looked different. Same houses. Same lawns. Same smug stone entry sign. But the illusion of control was gone. My driveway filled up before 8 a.m. Luxury SUVs. Nervous faces behind tinted glass. Neighbors who never learned my name suddenly knew my schedule. One by one they came. A couple from Lot 17. A retired dentist from the cul-de-sac. A woman clutching HOA violation notices like overdue bills. They all asked the same question in different ways. Is this real? Are we in trouble? What happens next? I didn't invite them in. We talked outside by the lake, where the water stayed calm no matter how ugly people got. I'm not here to hurt anyone, I said. I'm here to stop being hurt. That confused them. HOAs train people to believe power only flows one direction. From the board down. They didn't understand that power actually lives in paperwork. In dates. In signatures no one reads. By noon, Vivica made her move. She sent an email blast to the entire community. Subject line, false claims and illegal threats. She called me a disgruntled homeowner. Said I was spreading misinformation. Claimed the HOA's attorneys were handling the matter. What she didn't mention. 3 law firms had already declined to represent them. By afternoon, the city inspector arrived. Then the county environmental officer. Then someone from zoning. They didn't knock. They posted notices. Red tags on the clubhouse doors. Yellow warnings on the docks. A bright orange one on the stormwater outlet. Residents gathered like it was a parade. Except no one was smiling. Vivica arrived last. Still immaculate. Still defiant. But her sunglasses were gone. She marched straight up to me. "You planned this," she said. "You waited." "I restored a boathouse," I replied. "You destroyed it." She leaned in. "You think you've won?" I looked past her, at the inspectors taking photos. "I think this is the part where you realize the rules apply to you too." That's when her phone rang. She answered. Listened. Went pale. The HOA's insurance carrier had dropped them. Effective immediately. No coverage. No protection. No defense. A board member whispered, "What do we do?" Vivica snapped, "We fight." But the words sounded hollow. That night, I received an anonymous email. Subject: "We want her gone." Inside was a spreadsheet. Complaints. Harassment logs. Selective enforcement records. All tied to Vivica. Years of abuse. She hadn't just targeted me. She'd perfected it. And now, everyone was ready to talk. The meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. sharp. Mirror Lake Estates Clubhouse. For the first time since moving in, I walked through those glass doors like I belonged there. Every seat was filled. People stood along the walls. Couples whispered. Phones were already recording. Vivica sat at the front table, jaw tight, hands folded, posture perfect. The smile was gone. The champagne confidence? Evaporated. I took a seat in the back. Let them underestimate me one last time. The meeting opened with routine nonsense, minutes, votes, budget items no one cared about. Vivica rushed through it like a defendant stalling before sentencing. Then came new business. That's when Dale stood up. 81 years old. Vietnam vet. Shaky hands. Steel spine. "I'd like to file a motion," he said. Vivica scoffed. "You're not recognized." Dale didn't sit. "I'm recognized by Michigan state law," he replied calmly, holding up a document. "And by the bylaws you've been violating since 2019. A murmur rolled through the room. Another homeowner stood. Then another. Each holding paperwork. Each holding proof. Selective fines. Unauthorized demolitions. Forgery. Retaliation. Every accusation landed like a hammer. Vivica tried to interrupt. Someone cut her mic. That's when I stood up. The room went silent. "My name is Maxwell Cordell," I said. "And I own the land under every home you're sitting in." Gasps. I explained it simply. The developer never purchased the land outright. He leased it. Long-term. Cheap. Renewable. My grandfather bought the underlying parcels quietly. In the 60s. Held them. Never sold. Which meant the HOA operated on borrowed ground. And now that ground was revoked. Effective immediately. I slid copies of the termination notices onto the front table. Vivica reached for them like they might bite. "This isn't over," she hissed. "It is," I said. "For you." A vote was called. Emergency removal of the HOA president. Unanimous. Vivica stood up too fast. Her chair clattered behind her. She looked around. No allies. No applause. No power. She walked out alone. The next morning, the bulldozers returned. Not to destroy. To rebuild. The sound of construction at sunrise hits different when it's fixing something instead of erasing it. I stood on the shoreline with a mug of coffee, watching the first beams go up where my boathouse once stood. Same footprint. Same design. Same forest green pink Dutch chose in 1963. Only this time, everything was permitted. Engineers. Inspectors. Environmental officers. All nodding approval. Funny how fast rules start working when the bully is gone. But the fallout? That was just beginning. By noon, Vivica's name vanished from the HOA website. By evening, the HOA itself was temporarily suspended. Turns out when an association operates on land it doesn't own, with insurance it no longer has, and leadership removed for cause, the whole thing collapses like wet cardboard. Neighbors stopped by again. Not to ask questions. To apologize. Stories poured out. A single mom fined $2,000 for chalk drawings. A disabled veteran threatened over a ramp. A couple forced to repaint their house 3 times because Vivica didn't like the tone. Same pattern. Different victims. I listened. Because someone finally had. 2 weeks later, the lawsuit landed. Not mine. Theirs. A class action. 43 homeowners. 6 years of documented abuse. Vivica Drummond's name sat at the top of every filing. She tried to fight it. Tried to claim she was just enforcing standards. The judge didn't buy it. Neither did the forensic accountant who followed the money. HOA funds. Personal accounts. Luxury trips. That smiley face in purple ink? Turns out it cost her everything. As for Mirror Lake Estates? The residents voted. No new HOA. Ever. Instead, a voluntary maintenance co-op. Transparent. Accountable. Humane. And the lake? Still quiet. Still healing. The rebuilt boathouse was finished on a Friday. I carved something into the doorframe. Right below M plus L. D plus M. Dutch and Maxwell. Legacy restored. But there was one last twist Vivica never saw coming. The sheriff knocked just after dawn. Not for me. For Vivica. I watched from my dock as 2 cruisers idled at the end of the cul-de-sac that used to belong to Mirror Lake Estates. The same street where she once filmed my destruction like it was entertainment. Karma doesn't shout. It whispers. Fraud. Embezzlement. Abuse of authority. Civil conspiracy. The charges stack higher than the fines she loved issuing. Her house, white stucco, black trim, designer everything, went quiet within weeks. Then the foreclosure notice appeared. Read. Loud. Impossible to ignore. That land? Mine. The bank didn't even negotiate. Once the title records were reviewed, the leverage was gone. Every road, every utility easement, every access point ran through parcels my grandfather quietly secured decades ago. Dutch never bragged. He prepared. I didn't buy revenge. I inherited it. 6 months later, Mirror Lake looked like it used to. Kids fishing off docks without fear of citations. Kayaks gliding at sunset. Neighbors waving instead of watching. No clipboards. No purple ink. I kept my property private. But I opened the shoreline trails, once a week, sunrise to sunset. Rules posted. Respect required. Funny thing is, people follow fair rules. They always did. I sit on the rebuilt dock most mornings now. Coffee in hand. Loons calling across the water. Some days I talk to Lillian. Some days to Dutch. Some days I just listen. The boathouse door creaks the same way it always did. That sound survived bulldozers, bullies, and bureaucracy. Because legacy isn't about what you own. It's about what you refuse to let be erased. And if there's one thing I learned, HOAs don't run neighborhoods. People do. And when the wrong person grabs power, sometimes the land itself takes it back.